Picture this. You're 6 months pregnant, lying on an exam table waiting to find out if you're having a boy or a girl. Then your phone lights up. One notification, one photo, and in 60 seconds, your entire life explodes. That's what happened to Grace Montgomery, except her cheating husband had no idea who he was really married to. See, while he thought he was leaving his broke pregnant wife for a 26-year-old Instagram influencer, Grace was hiding a $350 million secret. And when the truth came out, let's just say karma didn't just knock on his door. She bought the whole damn house. This is the story of an oil heiress who disappeared to find real love, a CEO who made the worst bet of his life, and a woman who learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. Buckle up, because this one's got betrayal, billion-dollar secrets, and a twist that'll make you want to stand up and cheer. Let's go. The ultrasound wand was cold against Grace's belly when her phone lit up with a notification she'd spend the rest of her life wishing she'd never seen. Grace Eleanor Montgomery sat in Dr. Brennan's office for her 20-week anatomy scan. 6 months pregnant, finally showing, finally feeling real. The technician, a young woman with gentle hands and a soft voice, applied gel to Grace's swollen abdomen, searching for the baby's heartbeat. "There we go," the technician said. "Strong heartbeat, 145 beats per minute, very healthy." Grace exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Every appointment brought new anxiety. What if something was wrong? What if the baby wasn't growing properly? What if her body couldn't do this? Her phone buzzed on the chair beside her. Grace glanced at it reflexively. A habit she'd tried to break but never could. Instagram notification. At bracket symbol, Sienna Jade Rivers tagged your husband in a post. Grace's hand trembled as she picked up the phone. Her other hand rested on her belly, where their daughter, moved and kicked, oblivious to everything. She opened the app. There was Brandon, her Brandon. Brandon Cole Ashford, Chief Executive Officer of Ashford Digital Media. Her husband of 4 years. The father of the child currently being measured on the ultrasound screen beside her, but he wasn't alone. Sienna Rivers, 2 million followers, 26 years old. Impossibly beautiful in that effortless way that made Grace feel ancient at 32. Long dark hair, perfect skin, a body that had never carried a child. The photo showed them in Brandon's office. Grace recognized it immediately. She'd helped him decorate that office, the leather couch she'd selected, the abstract art she'd chosen, the view of Palo Alto she'd admired countless times, standing in that exact spot, feeling proud of what they'd built together. Sienna sat on the edge of Brandon's desk. He stood beside her, one hand casually resting on her shoulder. 2 champagne glasses sparkled in the afternoon light. The caption read, "When your CEO boyfriend surprises you with champagne at work." Champagne glass emoji, 2 hearts emoji, hashtag power couple, hashtag boss babe, hashtag living my best life. The room tilted. "Everything looks perfect," the technician said, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "All the measurements are right on track. Would you like to know the gender?" Grace couldn't breathe. Her chest felt tight. Her hands went numb. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Boyfriend, CEO boyfriend. Her husband. Her husband was someone's CEO boyfriend. "Mrs. Ashford." The technician's face came into focus, creased with concern. "Are you okay? You've gone very pale." Grace tried to speak, her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She wasn't Mrs. Ashford. Not really. She was Grace Montgomery, daughter of Theodore Montgomery, who owned the 3rd largest oil company in Texas. Granddaughter of Eleanor Montgomery, who had turned a single well into a billion-dollar empire. But Brandon didn't know that. Nobody knew that. Grace had worked so hard to hide it. To be normal. To be loved for herself, not her family's 9-figure fortune. She'd used her mother's maiden name, Hartley, when they met at a nonprofit fundraiser 5 years ago. She'd worked at that nonprofit, earning $30,000 a year. She'd driven a used Toyota, lived in a modest apartment in San Francisco, wore clothes from Target and H&M. Also, someone would love her. Just her. Not her money, not her family name, not the trust fund that held $350 million, just Grace. And now that someone, that person she'd given up everything for, was cheating on her while she was pregnant with an Instagram influencer who posted photos for the world to see. Mrs. Ashford? The technician touched her arm gently. Should I get the doctor? No, Grace's voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat. No, I'm fine, just felt dizzy for a moment. The technician didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Let me get you some water. As soon as she left the room, Grace did what she always did when overwhelmed. She checked her phone, lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock, each time, hoping the image would somehow be different, that she'd misread it, that this was all a terrible mistake. It never changed. The photo remained. Brandon and Sienna, champagne and smiles, CEO boyfriend. Grace's hands shook so badly she had to set the phone down on her chest. She stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them. 1, 2, 3. Trying to breathe, trying to think. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? Why her? Why Sienna? What was wrong with Grace? The technician returned with a small paper cup of water. Here, drink this slowly. Grace sat up carefully, wiping the ultrasound gel from her belly with the rough paper towels provided. Her hands left smears across her skin. She couldn't seem to coordinate her movements properly. Did you want to know the gender? The technician asked again, her voice gentle. Grace looked at the screen, at the grainy black and white image of her baby, her daughter, the child she and Brandon had created together. The child she thought would cement their love, prove their commitment, become the family she'd always dreamed of. It's a girl, the technician said softly. A healthy baby girl. A girl. Grace was having a daughter. She burst into tears. The technician, bless her, said nothing, just handed Grace more tissues and quietly left the room to give her privacy. Grace sat on the examination table in her maternity dress, clutching tissues, crying as silently as she could manage. Her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Text messages flooding in. From Becca. Have you seen Instagram? Call me now. From her mother. Sweetheart, call me when you can. From numbers she didn't recognize. And then a call. Brandon's name lit up the screen. Grace stared at it. Her thumb hovered over the answer button. She knew that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. She answered. Grace, hey, babe. Listen, I'm going to be late tonight. Big meeting with investors. Don't wait up, okay? His voice was cheerful, easy. The same voice that had told her he loved her this morning. The same lips that had kissed her forehead as she left for the doctor's appointment. The same man who'd held her hand through morning sickness, who'd rubbed her feet when they swelled, who'd promised to be there for everything. I saw the Instagram post, Grace said quietly. Silence, long, heavy, suffocating. Grace counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then, Grace, let me explain. She hung up. Her phone immediately started ringing again. Brandon's name flashing insistently. She declined the call. He called again. She turned off her phone entirely. Dr. Brennan knocked on the door. Grace, everything okay in there? Yes. Grace wiped her face, trying to compose herself. Yes, I'm fine, just emotional. Pregnancy hormones. Dr. Brennan entered, her expression kind but professional. She was in her late 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She'd been Grace's doctor since the positive pregnancy test 3 months ago. The technician mentioned you felt dizzy. Are you experiencing any pain? Cramping? Bleeding? No, nothing like that. I just got some upsetting news. I'm okay. Dr. Brennan studied her face. Grace, stress isn't good for you or the baby. If something's wrong, you need support. Family, friends. I have people, Grace said. It wasn't a lie. She did have people. She'd just been avoiding them for 4 years. Good. Because you're about to enter your 3rd trimester. Things get harder from here. You need a support system. Dr. Brennan made notes on her tablet. Everything looks perfect with the baby. She's measuring right on track. I want to see you again in 2 weeks. If you experience any problems before then, call me immediately. I will, thank you. Grace dressed slowly after Dr. Brennan left. Her maternity jeans felt tight. Her shirt rode up over her belly. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the sink. 32 years old, 6 months pregnant, wearing a Target maternity outfit that cost less than $50. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes from another sleepless night. Next to Sienna Rivers, Grace looked like someone's tired older sister, someone who'd given up, someone who'd let herself go. No wonder Brandon wanted someone else. Grace stopped that thought immediately. No, this wasn't her fault. She was pregnant with his child. She hadn't let herself go. She was growing a human being inside her body. That was hard work, important work, but the thought lingered anyway, poisoning her mind. She drove home in a daze. Her Tesla, one of the few luxuries she'd allowed herself after marriage, navigated familiar streets while her mind raced. How long had Brandon been cheating? 3 months? 6 months? Longer? Had he been with Sienna while Grace was suffering through first trimester nausea? While she was so exhausted she could barely function? While her body was changing and expanding and creating life? Had he been planning this? Waiting for the right moment to leave her? Grace pulled into the driveway of their Palo Alto home. 4 bedrooms, designer kitchen, pool in the back, $2.5 million. Brandon's dream house. Grace had paid the down payment with money from her trust fund. She told Brandon it was inheritance from her grandmother. $200,000, she'd said. Not technically a lie, it was inheritance. She just hadn't mentioned the other $349,800,000 in the same account. The house was empty. Brandon's car was gone. Of course, Grace stood in the foyer listening to the silence. How many times had she come home to an empty house over the past few months? How many nights had Brandon claimed to be working late? How many weekends had he said he needed to meet with clients? She'd been so stupid. Grace climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, one hand on her belly. The baby kicked, strong, insistent, demanding attention. "I know, baby girl," Grace whispered. "I know. Mama's got you, I promise." She walked down the hall to the nursery they'd finished painting last week. Soft yellow, gender neutral, Brandon had insisted. "Let's wait and see what we're having," he'd said. Now Grace understood. He was waiting to see if he'd even be here. The room looked perfect. Expensive crib, matching dresser, rocking chair in the corner. Everything carefully selected and arranged. Everything except the one thing that mattered most, a father who would stay. Grace sank to the floor, her back against the wall, her legs stretched out in front of her. Her phone, which she'd turned back on during the drive home, buzzed incessantly in her purse. She ignored it all. Instead, she sat in the empty yellow nursery and talked to her daughter. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to give you everything. A mother and a father who loved each other, a house full of laughter, stability, family. I wanted you to have what I had growing up. But I guess I can't give you that. I guess I failed before you were even born." The baby kicked hard as if in protest. Grace smiled despite the tears streaming down her face. "You're right. I'm not being fair to either of us. This isn't my fault. This is his choice, his failure, not ours." She sat there until the afternoon light faded to dusk, until her legs cramped, until the baby's movements slowed as she settled into sleep. Finally, Grace pulled out her phone. 17 missed calls from Brandon, 32 text messages, increasingly desperate. "Grace, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. Sienna is just a friend. She posted that without my permission. I can explain everything. Please call me back." "Grace, this is ridiculous. I'm coming home. We need to talk." Grace scrolled through them all, reading each one twice, looking for any sign of real remorse, real apology, real acknowledgement of what he'd done. She found none, just excuses, just justifications, just anger that she wasn't responding. The garage door opened. Brandon was home. Grace stayed where she was, on the floor of the nursery, waiting. She heard Brandon's footsteps on the stairs, heavy, rushed. He was looking for her. "Grace?" His voice echoed through the house. "Grace, where are you?" She didn't answer. His footsteps moved down the hall, their bedroom, the guest room, the bathroom. Then he appeared in the nursery doorway. He was still in his work suit. Tom Ford, navy blue. Grace had bought it for his birthday last year, $2,000. He'd complained that it wasn't the right shade of navy. There you are. Relief flooded his face. Why weren't you answering your phone? I've been worried sick. Grace looked up at him, really looked at him. When had his eyes become so cold? Or had they always been this way, and she'd just been too in love to notice? How long? She asked. Grace, listen to me. That post, it wasn't what it looked like. Sienna is a client. We were celebrating closing a big deal. She took a photo and got carried away with the caption. You know how influencers are. Everything is content to them. How long, Brandon? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Grace used to find endearing. Now it just looked rehearsed, practiced. There's nothing going on. I swear, you're overreacting. She called you her CEO boyfriend, Darren. She was joking, being dramatic. You know how social media is. Nothing is real. It's all performance. Grace used the wall to push herself up. Standing took effort now. Her center of gravity had shifted. Her body no longer felt like her own. Look at me, she said. Look me in the eye and tell me you're not having an affair with Sienna Rivers. Brandon met her gaze. For a moment, she thought he might actually tell the truth. Then his expression hardened. This is crazy. You're being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones are making you irrational. How long? Grace, there's nothing to tell. You're inventing problems that don't exist. Grace felt something shift inside her. Not the baby. Something else. Something fundamental. She knew. Deep down, she'd always known. She'd just been too afraid to admit it. Too afraid to face the truth that she'd given up everything, her family, her identity, her life, for someone who saw her as convenient. 3 months, she said quietly. You've been with her for 3 months. Since I started showing. Since my body started changing. Since I stopped being fun. Brandon's face flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. Grace, you have to understand. The pregnancy changed everything. You changed. You're always tired. You don't want to go out anymore. You've let yourself go. Let myself go? Grace's voice was deadly quiet. I'm carrying your daughter. See, this is what I mean. Everything is about the baby now. What about us? What about me? What about my needs? Grace stared at him. This man, this stranger wearing her husband's face. Your needs? Yes, my needs. I'm not just some sperm donor, Grace. I'm a person. I have a life, a career, friends. I can't just put everything on hold because you're pregnant. I didn't ask you to put anything on hold. I asked you to be present, to be my partner, to be here. I am here. I work 60 hours a week to pay for this house, for your car, for everything you want. What more do you expect from me? Grace almost laughed, almost told him right then and there that she'd paid for most of their life together, that the down payment on this house had come from her money, that the Tesla was hers, that she could buy and sell everything he owned 10 times over. But she didn't, because even now, even in this moment, some part of her still hoped he loved her, really loved her. Not her money, just her. I expect you to not cheat on me, she said instead. That seems like a pretty basic expectation for a marriage. I told you nothing happened. Sienna is a friend, a client, that's all. Get out. What? Get out. I can't look at you right now. Grace, be reasonable. This is my house too. Then I'll leave. Grace walked past him, moving as quickly as her pregnant body would allow. Down the stairs, through the kitchen she'd lovingly designed, past the dining room where they'd hosted dinner parties, through the living room where they'd watched movies together. She grabbed her purse and her car keys from the counter. Where are you going? Brandon called after her, his voice sharp with irritation now. Grace, we need to figure this out. She paused at the door, turned, one last look at the man she'd thought she would spend her life with. Figure it out yourself. I'm done shrinking so you can feel big. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned them. They just emerged, fully formed and absolutely true. Brandon's face flushed with anger. Fine, go, run away. That's what you always do when things get hard. You hide instead of dealing with reality. Grace felt the words like a slap, because part of them was true. She had been hiding for 4 years from her family. from her identity, from herself, but not anymore. She walked out the door and got into her car. Her hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. Once the engine started, she just sat there, unable to move. Where was she supposed to go? She couldn't go back inside. Not to that house, not to him. So she drove. Grace drove with no destination in mind. Just drove. Away from the house, away from Brandon, away from the life that had just exploded around her. The baby kicked, persistent, demanding, alive, real, 24 weeks pregnant, viable, the doctor said, but barely, too early, too fragile, just like Grace felt right now. Her phone rang. Becca, Grace let it go to voicemail. She couldn't talk. Not yet. Not while she was trying to keep the car on the road through tears that wouldn't stop falling. The phone rang again. Her mother. Again. Ashanen. Voicemail. Text messages poured in. Her phone buzzed continuously in the cup holder. Grace pulled off the highway at random, finding herself on a familiar street. She knew this area. She'd lived here once in her early 20s, before Brandon, before everything. She pulled into a parking lot. Target, of course. Grace sat in her parked car, unable to go anywhere. She knew she should call her parents, should find a hotel, should do something. But she just sat there, watching other people go about their normal lives, shopping for normal things, living in a world that hadn't just shattered into a million pieces. A woman walked by pushing a stroller. A toddler sat inside, pointing at birds and laughing. The woman smiled down at her child with so much love it hurt to watch. Would Grace ever have that simple bone, that uncomplicated love? Or would her daughter grow up asking why daddy lived somewhere else? Why mommy cried at night? Why their family wasn't whole? Grace's phone rang again. Becca, again. This time Grace answered. Where are you? Target parking lot. Which one? The one on El Camino Real. Stay there. I'm 15 minutes away. Becca hung up before Grace could protest. Grace leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. Her mind raced through memories, trying to find the moment where everything went wrong. Their wedding day. Had Brandon seemed distant then? No, he'd cried when she walked down the aisle. He'd told her she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Their honeymoon in Italy. Had he seemed bored? No. He'd been attentive, romantic, everything she dreamed of. The moment she told him she was pregnant. Had he seemed unhappy? Maybe. Just for a second. A flash of something that looked like panic before he smiled and pulled her into his arms. When had it changed? Grace opened her eyes and pulled up Instagram on her phone. She scrolled through Sienna's feed, torturing herself with each photo. Sienna at fancy restaurants. Sienna at the beach. Sienna at fashion shows and gallery openings. Sienna at the gym, her body perfect and toned. Sienna everywhere. Grace no longer went. Doing everything Grace no longer did. Being everything Grace no longer was. Young, carefree, unencumbered. Not swollen and tired and constantly uncomfortable. Not carrying the weight of another human being inside her body. Not wearing maternity clothes from Target because she'd spent 4 years pretending she couldn't afford anything better. Grace scrolled back through the photos. There, 3 months ago, the first photo of Sienna and Brandon together. At a company party, Brandon in the background, talking to someone. Sienna in the foreground, posing. Caption, networking with the best in the business. 2 months ago, Brandon more prominent now. Sienna next to him. Caption, learning from the best. So grateful for amazing mentors. 6 weeks ago, Brandon's hand on Sienna's shoulder. Caption, when your boss becomes your biggest supporter. 4 weeks ago, Brandon and Sienna at dinner. Caption, working dinners with my favorite people. 2 weeks ago, the office photo, Brandon and Sienna close together. Caption, partnership goals. And then today, CEO boyfriend. Grace watched the relationship develop in reverse. Watched Brandon move from background to foreground, from professional to personal, from mentor to lover. All while Grace was home, pregnant and oblivious. A tap on her window made her jump. Becca stood outside, her face creased with concern. Grace unlocked the door. Becca opened it and crouched down beside the car. "Come here," Becca said simply. Grace unbuckled her seatbelt and let her best friend pull her into an awkward hug, made more awkward by the steering wheel and the pregnant belly between them. "I gave up everything," Grace sobbed into Becca's shoulder. "Everything. My family, my identity, my life. And for what? For him to leave me while I'm pregnant?" "Honey," Becca's voice was gentle but firm. "You didn't give up anything, you hid. And that's not the same thing." Grace pulled back. "What? Come on, get out of the car. Let's sit in mine. You can't stay in a Target parking lot forever." They moved to Becca's car. Grace's body protested. Everything hurt. Her back, her feet, her chest, her heart. Becca turned on the heat and handed Grace a bottle of water from her bag. "Drink," she ordered. "You're pregnant. You need to stay hydrated." Grace drank. The water was cold and clean. It helped, a little. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Grace stared at her hands. Her wedding ring suddenly felt heavy, wrong, like it didn't belong there anymore. "There's something I never told you," Grace said finally. "I know." "What?" "Grace, I've known you since college. You think I didn't notice? The way you always paid cash for everything? The way you never complained about money? The way you'd casually mention places you'd been, things you'd done, people you'd met? But you never said it out loud. But honey, I'm not stupid. And I did Google you. Once. Right after we met." Becca smiled gently. "Grace Eleanor Montgomery, daughter of Theodore Montgomery of Montgomery Oil and Energy Holdings. Estimated family net worth $2.3 billion. Grace's mouth fell open. "You knew this whole time?" "I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would. Everyone has their reasons for privacy." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it didn't matter. You were my friend. You are my friend, with or without the money. That's why I never mentioned it." Grace started crying again, harder this time. All the tears she'd been holding back for 4 years. All the loneliness of living a lie. All the fear that nobody would love the real her. "He doesn't know," she whispered. "Brandon has no idea." "I figured as much. I wanted someone to love me. Just me. Not my money, not my family name. Just Grace." Becca took Grace's hand. "Honey, you didn't hide your money to find real love. You hid it because you were afraid. Afraid of being used. Afraid of being wanted for the wrong reasons. Afraid of your own power." The words hit like a physical blow because they were true. Grace had been terrified. Terrified that she was only valuable for her wealth. Terrified that without it, she was nothing. Nobody. So she'd made herself nothing and nobody on purpose. To test the universe. To prove she could be loved. And the universe had answered with Brandon. A man who loved her convenient smallness, her lack of demands, her willingness to disappear into his life, his dreams, his world. "I wasn't being humble," Grace said slowly, understanding blooming like a dark flower in her chest. "I was being a coward." "No, you were being human. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. But look where it got me. Pregnant and alone, sitting in a Target parking lot, married to a man who's cheating on me with someone younger and prettier and better." "Stop." Becca's voice was sharp. "Sienna isn't better. She's just different. And Brandon didn't fall in love with a normal girl making normal money. He fell in love with someone who made herself small enough for him to feel big. That's not love, Grace. That's convenience." Grace's phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Can we please talk about this reasonably? I think we just need some time apart. Maybe you should stay with your parents for a while. Give us both space to think, space to think." While she was 6 months pregnant with his child, while he was probably with Sienna right now. "I need to call my parents," Grace said quietly. "Yeah," Becca agreed. "You really do." Grace stared at her phone. She hadn't called her father in 4 years. Not since she'd told him she was marrying Brandon and moving to California. Not since the fight where he'd begged her to reconsider, to wait, to let him run a background check on Brandon, at least. She'd refused. She'd been so sure, so certain that she knew better, that her father was just being overprotective. overbearing, unable to let her make her own choices. Now she understood. Her father had seen what she couldn't, that Brandon loved her dependence, her admiration, her willingness to make his life the center of her universe. Not her. Grace dialed. Her father answered on the first ring. While waiting for the plane, Grace sat in Becca's car, scrolling through her phone one last time. Not looking at Brandon's messages, not looking at Instagram, looking at photos of herself from 4 years ago. There she was at a Montgomery oil gala, wearing Valentino, confident and radiant. There she was at her college graduation, surrounded by family. There she was on a horse at the ranch, laughing, free, herself. When had she stopped being that person? What are you looking at? Becca asked. Proof that I used to exist. Grace showed her the photos. Look at her. She knew who she was. She wasn't afraid. She's still in there, Becca said gently. You didn't lose her. You just buried her under someone else's expectations. Grace stared at a photo from her 21st birthday. Her father had thrown her a party at the ranch. 200 guests. She'd worn a champagne-colored dress and felt like a princess. Not because of the dress or the party, but because she'd felt worthy of celebration. When had she stopped feeling worthy? I need to tell you something, Grace said. When Brandon proposed, he didn't ask my father's permission. I told him not to. I said it was old-fashioned and unnecessary. But the truth is, I didn't want my father to run a background check. I didn't want anyone to look too closely. Because I think, deep down, I knew something was off. Grace. I ignored red flags because I wanted so badly to be normal. To be chosen for me, not for my money. But I wasn't chosen at all. I was just convenient. Becca took her hand. Then let's go somewhere you'll never be convenient again. Let's go home. 20 minutes later, Grace was boarding the Montgomery family jet, leaving California behind. Gracie? His voice broke her. The nickname he'd called her since childhood. The warmth she'd forgotten. The love she'd pushed away because she thought she didn't need it. Daddy, her voice cracked. I need to come home. Plane or car? What? Should I send the plane or are you driving? Either way, your mother's already making up your room. Of course he knew. Theodore Montgomery hadn't built an empire by being unobservant. He'd probably known something was wrong the moment she stopped calling. The moment she started hiding. The plane, Grace whispered. Please. It'll be at San Jose in 2 hours. Grace? Yeah? It's about damn time. The Montgomery family plane touched down at a private airstrip outside Austin just after midnight. Grace hadn't been to Texas in 4 years. Her mother waited on the tarmac. Carolyn Montgomery, wearing designer pajamas and a cashmere robe at this ungodly hour, somehow still managing to look effortlessly elegant. Oh, baby girl, Caroline said, pulling Grace into her arms. Grace broke down all over again. Her mother's perfume, Chanel No. 5, the same scent Grace had grown up with, wrapped around her like a blanket, like safety, like home. I've got you, Carolyn murmured. You're home now, I've got you. They drove through the dark Texas night in silence. Grace curled up in the passenger seat of her mother's Range Rover, watching familiar landscapes slide past the windows. The ranch house sat on 2,000 acres outside Austin. Grace had grown up here, learned to ride horses here, had her first kiss by the pond, learned about business sitting in her father's study, left it all behind to prove something to herself, to prove she could make it on her own. What a joke. The house was lit up, warm and welcoming. Home. Her father stood in the doorway. Theo Montgomery, 68 years old, still strong, still powerful, still her daddy. Grace climbed out of the car slowly. Everything hurt. Her back, her feet, her swollen ankles. Theo met her halfway, pulling her into a careful hug that accommodated her pregnant belly. Welcome home, sweetheart, he said quietly. That was all. No, I told you so. No recriminations. Just welcome home. Grace cried on her father's shoulder while her mother retrieved her bag from the car. She cried for the years she'd wasted, for the family she'd pushed away, for the daughter she was about to bring into a broken home. Inside, nothing had changed. The same furniture, the same art on the walls, the same feeling of solidity and permanence. Her childhood bedroom was exactly as she left it. Awards from debate team on the shelves, photos from cotillion on the walls. Her acceptance letter to Stanford, framed, hanging above her desk. Evidence of the life she'd abandoned. Grace stood in her bathroom at 2 in the morning, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked exhausted, defeated. Nothing like the confident young woman who'd once stood in this spot, convinced she was about to conquer the world. She turned on the bath, not because she wanted one, but because she needed something to do with her hands, something to focus on besides the chaos in her head. She sat on the edge of the tub, fully clothed in her Target maternity dress, an expensive coat that didn't match, watching the water rise. Steam filled the room, clouding the mirror, hiding her reflection. The baby kicked. Grace put her hand on her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. This is the world you're being born into. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to give you everything, but I guess perfect doesn't exist." The water rose higher. Grace let it run until the tub was nearly full, then turned off the tap. She sat there in silence, listening to water drip from the faucet, listening to her own breathing, listening to her daughter move inside her. Finally, she stood, dried her face, changed into pajamas her mother had left on the bed, crawled under covers that smelled like lavender and home, and slept. For the first time in months, she slept through the entire night. Grace woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot everything that had happened, forgot Brandon and Sienna and Instagram posts, forgot her broken marriage and uncertain future. Then the baby kicked, and it all came rushing back. Grace dressed slowly in maternity leggings and an oversized sweater, her mother's clothes. They fit better than Grace's cheap Target wardrobe. Downstairs, her father sat at the kitchen table with coffee and pie, chocolate cream, Grace's favorite. "Your mother's asleep," Theo said, pushing the pie toward her. But she left instructions. "You're to stay as long as you need. No arguments, no timeline. And before you protest, this isn't charity. This is family." Grace sat across from him. This man who'd built an empire from Texas dirt, who'd taught her about business and power and never letting anyone underestimate you. "I messed up, Daddy." "No." His voice was firm. "You made a choice that didn't work out. That's not the same thing. I hid who I was. I lied. You protected yourself. I don't agree with how you did it, but I understand why." Theo pushed the pie closer. "But Grace, you can't hide from your own life. Not anymore. You've got a daughter coming. She deserves a mother who stands tall, not one who apologizes for existing." The words settled into Grace's bones. Heavy, true, undeniable. Her daughter would never wonder if people loved her for her money or herself, because Grace would make sure she knew she was worth loving either way. "I need to figure out what to do about Brandon," Grace said. "Do you love him?" Grace opened her mouth to say yes automatically, then stopped. Did she love Brandon? Or did she love the idea of Brandon? The safety he represented, the normalcy? "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Then you have your answer." They ate pie in comfortable silence. Grace's phone, which she'd left upstairs, was probably exploding with messages. She didn't care. "Grace," her father's voice turned serious. "Before you make any decisions, you need to talk to Marcus Webb." Marcus Webb, the Montgomery family attorney for 30 years. The man who'd handled her grandfather's estate, her parents' prenup, every major business deal. "I don't want to involve the family lawyers." "Grace Eleanor Montgomery." Her father's voice turned to steel. "You are the family. Act like it." Marcus Webb arrived at the ranch at 9 in the morning, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Steel gray hair, expensive suit, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd known Grace since she was in diapers. He did not look happy. "Let me see the messages," Marcus said without preamble. Grace handed over her phone. Marcus scrolled through Brandon's texts, his expression darkening with each one. "Did you sign a prenup?" "Yes." "Do you have a copy?" "It's at the house, in the safe." "I need it, today." Marcus looked at Grace over his reading glasses. "Did Brandon ever discuss your financial situation? Your family?" He thinks my family is comfortable but not wealthy. He thinks my trust fund from my grandmother was maybe $200,000, enough for a down payment on the house, nothing more. And he has no idea about Montgomery oil? None. Good. Marcus's smile was sharp. Keep it that way. For now. Over the next hour, Marcus explained California divorce laws, community property, asset division, child support calculations. Then he explained something Grace hadn't considered. Given your actual financial situation, this divorce is going to go very differently than Brandon expects. He's probably assuming you'll need his support, his money, his mercy. Marcus leaned forward. He has no idea he's divorcing one of the wealthiest women in Texas. The words hung in the air. All this time, Grace had thought hiding her money would protect her, make her safe, prove her worth beyond her wealth. Instead, it had given her the ultimate weapon. Knowledge Brandon didn't have. Power he couldn't see coming. "What do you need me to do?" Grace asked. "Nothing, yet. Let him think he's winning. Let him think he has all the control." Marcus made notes on his tablet. "We'll file for divorce on your terms, not his. And Grace, stop hiding. The world's going to find out eventually. Might as well be on your terms." After Marcus left, Grace walked the ranch properties of Hawaii, the land her great-grandmother had bought with oil money, the legacy that had been waiting for her all along. Her mother found her by the pond at sunset. "You're plotting," Carolyn observed. "Is it that obvious? You get the same look your father does right before he bankrupts someone." Carolyn sat on the bench beside her daughter. "What do you want, Grace?" "Really want?" Grace watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. In 4 months, she'd be a mother. A single mother, probably. Raising a daughter alone. "I want her to never feel like she has to hide," Grace said quietly. "I want her to know her worth, to own her power, to never make herself small for any man. Then show her how it's done." Grace's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Ashford, this is Jennifer Collins from Page 6. We're running a story tomorrow about your husband and Sienna Rivers. Would you like to comment?" The media knew. By tomorrow, everyone would know. Grace looked at her mother. Carolyn nodded. "Yes," Grace said into the phone. "I'd love to comment." She spent the next 30 minutes carefully crafting her response. Not angry, not bitter, just honest. "I'm disappointed but not surprised. While I focus on preparing for my daughter's arrival, Brandon can focus on whatever, or whoever, helps him feel important. I wish him well in his future endeavors." Classy, dignified, devastating. Jennifer Collins thanked her and hung up. "That'll hurt him more than any insult would," Caroline said approvingly. "You dismissed him, made him irrelevant. Nothing wounds a man's ego like being treated as unimportant." Grace felt something shift in her, not quite healing, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. She wasn't a victim. She was a Montgomery, and Montgomerys didn't hide. They rose. That night, Grace did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her laptop and logged into the Montgomery Oil Board portal. The password still worked. She read through financial reports, strategic plans, market analyses, everything she'd been avoiding for 4 years. Her father had kept her on the board despite her absence, kept her trust fund active, kept her place at the table waiting, because he'd known. Eventually, she'd come home. Grace fell asleep reading quarterly earnings reports, feeling more like herself than she had in years. The Page 6 article dropped at 6 in the morning. Tech CEO Brandon Ashford leaves pregnant wife for Instagram influencer. The photos were damning. Brandon and Sienna at restaurants, holding hands, kissing in his office. The office his pregnant wife had decorated. But Grace's comment was the real story. By noon, the internet had exploded. Sienna's Instagram was flooded with comments. Thousands of women calling her a homewrecker, calling Brandon a deadbeat, demanding accountability. Someone leaked that Ashford Digital Media was struggling financially. The company LinkedIn became a disaster zone. Grace's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, bloggers, people from her past she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored them all. Instead, she was in her childhood bedroom having a panic attack. Because this was real now. Public. Permanent. There was no going back. No pretending it hadn't happened. No fixing this quietly and moving on. Her private pain was now public entertainment. Grace sat on her bedroom floor at 2 in the afternoon, pulling every item out of her closet. One by one, methodically, clothes from high school, designer dresses she'd worn to galas, jeans from college, everything she'd left behind when she ran away to be normal. She wasn't organizing, wasn't cleaning, just moving, doing something, anything to avoid thinking about thousands of strangers discussing her life, her marriage, her failure. The baby kicked. Grace stopped, hand on belly, surrounded by clothes and memories. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. This is the world you're being born into, where people you've never met feel entitled to judge you, where your parents' mistakes become everyone's business." Her phone buzzed. "Becca, I'm here. Let me in." "The gate code is 4729, Grace said. 15 minutes later, Becca burst into her bedroom like a hurricane. "Okay, first things first. Get off the floor. Second, we're cleaning this mess up. Third, we're talking." They spent an hour organizing Grace's closet, folding clothes, creating order from chaos. It was therapeutic, meditative, a way to feel control when everything else felt chaotic. Finally, they sat on Grace's bed. "How are you really?" Becca asked. Terrified. Grace's voice cracked. "I'm having a baby in 4 months, alone. Everyone knows now. Everyone's watching. And I'm supposed to just, what, figure it out? Raise her by myself in that house where She couldn't finish. "Grace, you spent 4 years working a job that paid $30,000 when you have hundreds of millions in the bank. You drove a Toyota when you could have had anything. You shopped at Target because you wanted to, not because you had to. You chose poverty over privilege just to prove you could survive on your own." Becca took Grace's hands. "If that's not strength, I don't know what is. But look where it got me. It got you knowledge. Brandon showed you exactly who he is when he thought you had nothing. Imagine if he'd known the truth from the beginning. You'd never have known if he loved you or loved your money." Grace had never thought of it that way. Her phone rang. Marcus Webb. "Brandon's attorney just contacted me. He wants to meet. He's proposing a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" "He'll give you the house and $50,000 a year in child support if you sign away any claim to his business." Grace laughed. It was a bitter sound. "He thinks he's being generous. He thinks you're desperate, powerless, that you need him." Marcus paused. "Should I tell him to go to hell?" "Tell him I'll consider it, but I need time to think." Grace hung up and looked at Becca. "He has no idea." Not a clue. Grace's mind raced. The house, did she even want it? Every room held memories of Brandon, of their life together, of the lies she'd told herself about being happy. Her phone rang again. Unknown Dallas number. "Miss Montgomery, this is Rachel Torres from Texas Monthly. We're running a feature on female energy executives under 40. Your father suggested we interview you." Her father, of course. "I'm not an executive," Grace said carefully. "Not yet, but we understand you're on the board of Montgomery Oil and Energy Holdings as a trust beneficiary. We'd love to feature your story, the oil heiress who disappeared, and now your return." Grace looked at Becca, at her mother who'd appeared in the doorway with tea, at her father standing behind Caroline with an expression that said, "Your choice, kiddo." This was it, the moment where she decided. Keep hiding in the shadows, or step into the light. Own who she really was, or keep pretending. "When would you like to schedule the interview?" Grace asked. Grace did something she hadn't done in years. She called her old salon in Austin, the one where appointments cost $300 and they knew her family by name. "Grace Montgomery," she said to the receptionist, "I need an appointment for tomorrow." "Of course, Miss Montgomery. We have an opening at 10. Color, cut, styling, everything. I want to look like myself again." She didn't explain that she hadn't looked like herself in 4 years, that she'd been wearing discount clothes and drugstore makeup and hiding behind a fake last name. The next morning, Grace sat in the salon chair, 7 months pregnant, and told the stylist, "Make me look like a Montgomery." 3 hours later, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her hair was professionally colored and cut. Her skin glowed from a facial. Her nails were manicured. She looked expensive, powerful. like someone who belonged on magazine covers, like herself. The Texas Monthly interview was scheduled for the following week. 7 days to prepare, 7 days to decide exactly what story she wanted to tell. Her father met her in his study that evening. "Before you do this," Theo said, "you need to understand what comes next. Once you're public forever. No taking it back. People will want things from you, access, money, favors. Your privacy disappears." "I gave up my privacy when I married Brandon," Grace replied. "At least this way, I control the narrative." Theo nodded approvingly. "Then let's talk strategy." They spent hours planning what to reveal, what to protect, how to position the story not as a scandal, but as a comeback. "You're not a scorned wife seeking revenge," Theo explained. "You're a businesswoman who made a personal choice to step back and is now ready to step forward. The timing just happens to coincide with your divorce." But everyone knows that's not true, Barajo. Doesn't matter. What matters is the story we tell being better than the story they'll make up. Meanwhile, in Palo Alto, Brandon was panicking. Preston Caldwell, his business partner, called Grace directly. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about Sienna." "It's not your fault, Preston. Look, I need to tell you something." Preston's voice dropped. "Ashford Digital Media is in trouble. We're bleeding money. Brandon's been using company funds for personal expenses, dinners, gifts, travel, all for Sienna. We're facing a possible audit." Grace processed this information carefully. "How bad?" "Bad enough that your settlement, the house and child support, might be coming from a bankrupt company." "Interesting. Preston, are you still minority shareholder?" 60-40 split. Brandon has 60, I have 40. "What if that changed?" Silence. "Then what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes the best revenge is business," Grace said carefully. "But we can talk about that later. First, I need to handle my divorce." She hung up and immediately called Marcus. "I need you to investigate Ashford Digital Media, financial records, everything, especially any funds Brandon diverted for personal use." "Already on it," Marcus said. "Grace, there's something else you should know. Sienna Rivers just posted on Instagram." Grace opened the app with a sense of dread. There it was, a photo of Sienna and Brandon, her left hand prominently displayed, showing a massive diamond ring. Caption, "When you know, you know." Ring emoji, "Can't wait to start our life together." Hashtag engaged, hashtag new beginnings, hashtag power couple. Engaged. Brandon had proposed to his mistress while his pregnant wife was filing for divorce. The comments were brutal. Thousands of people calling Sienna a homewrecker, calling Brandon a deadbeat father, demanding they both be ashamed. Becca found Grace staring at her phone in the ranch kitchen. "Did you see?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" Grace looked up, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she smiled. Really smiled. "Actually, yeah, I am, because he just made the biggest mistake of his life." Let them have each other. Let them have their perfect Instagram life, their engagement photos and wedding planning, and pretend happiness. Because when this was over, they'd have nothing but each other. And Grace would have everything. The Texas Monthly photographer arrived at the Montgomery Ranch on a crisp October morning. Grace was 7 months pregnant now, visibly, undeniably pregnant. She wore a custom maternity dress from a Houston designer, cream-colored silk that draped beautifully over her belly. Her hair and makeup were professionally done. She looked every inch the oil heiress she'd always been. The photographer wanted shots on horseback. "I don't think horseback riding while 7 months pregnant is medically advisable," Grace said dryly. They settled for photos by the pond, in her father's study, surrounded by leather-bound books and oil paintings. At the dining room table with her parents, 3 generations of Montgomery wealth and power. Rachel Torres, the interviewer, was sharp and direct. Mid-30s, obviously intelligent. No nonsense. "So Grace, you disappeared 4 years ago, cut ties with your family, moved to California, worked at a nonprofit making $30,000 a year, married Brandon Ashford." Grace had prepared for this question, had practiced her answer. But sitting here now, she realized she didn't want to give the rehearsed response. She wanted to tell the truth. I was scared, Grace said simply. My grandmother built this empire from nothing. My father expanded it into what it is today. I grew up knowing I'd inherit something extraordinary, and I was terrified. Of what? Of failing, of succeeding and never knowing if people liked me or for my money, of becoming one of those people who can't trust anyone because everyone wants something. So you ran away? I tested the world, Grace corrected. I wanted to know what my life would look like without the Montgomery name, without the money, without the expectations. And what did you learn? Grace felt the question hit deep. What had she learned? That hiding from who you are doesn't make you brave. It makes you invisible. That people will take advantage of you, whether you're rich or poor. That love isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. That she'd wasted 4 years being afraid. I learned that hiding from who you are doesn't protect you, Grace said slowly. It just makes you a stranger to yourself. Rachel asked about Brandon, about the divorce, about raising her daughter alone. Grace felt the familiar panic rising, the urge to check her phone obsessively, to apologize, to make herself small and agreeable. But this time, she recognized it, named it, and pushed through it. My daughter will grow up knowing that leaving something that hurts you isn't failure. It's wisdom. She'll know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. The interview ran for 3 hours. They talked about Montgomery Oil, about the energy transition, about Grace's plans for her trust fund. I want to invest in female-founded companies, Grace explained. Women in energy, tech, finance, industries where we're told we don't belong. I want to prove that wrong. Is this revenge against your ex-husband? Grace met Rachel's eyes. This isn't about him at all. This is about me finally showing up for myself. After the interview ended, Grace's mother found her in the nursery they'd set up at the ranch. A backup plan, a safety net, a place for Grace's daughter to visit her grandparents. You did well today, Caroline said. I told the truth. That's all. The truth is harder than lying, especially when the truth makes you vulnerable. Carolyn sat in the rocking chair. This article is going to change everything. I know. Brandon is going to lose his mind. I'm counting on it. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She went to the kitchen at midnight and baked her grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. Not because anyone asked, not because she was hungry, but because her hands needed something to do. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter and sugar. The baby kicked rhythmically like she was keeping time. Grace stood at the counter, methodically scooping dough onto baking sheets, and felt something like peace. Small, fragile, but real. Her phone rang. Marcus. Brandon's attorney is demanding a meeting. He says Brandon is willing to increase the settlement to avoid prolonged litigation. How much? The house, $100,000 a year in child support, and 20% of his company stock. Grace did the math. If Ashford Digital Media was worth $15 million, 20% was $3 million. Plus the house, plus support. Brandon thought he was being generous. Thought he was buying her silence, her cooperation. He had no idea. Tell him no, Grace said. Grace, tell him no. I don't want his house. I don't want his stock. I want a divorce and fair child support based on his actual financial situation. Nothing more. Are you sure? Positive. I'm not interested in taking pieces of a sinking ship. What Grace didn't tell Marcus was that she'd already had her financial team analyze Ashford Digital Media's books. She knew exactly how much the company was worth, exactly how much Brandon had stolen. She wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in justice. And in this case, justice looked like business. Grace's phone rang at 7 in the morning. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Grace Montgomery? Yes? This is Sienna Rivers. We need to talk. Sienna wanted to meet in person. Neutral location, a coffee shop in Austin. Becca thought it was a trap. Grace's parents thought it was a mistake. Marcus flatly forbade it. Grace went anyway. Sienna arrived 20 minutes late, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a designer handbag. The engagement ring Brandon gave her was huge, ostentatious, nothing like the delicate band he'd given Grace. Thanks for meeting me, Sienna said, sliding into the booth. I'm curious why you wanted to. Sienna removed her sunglasses. Grace was shocked to see that she looked exhausted, scared, young, so young. How old are you? Grace asked. 26. You know I'm 32, right? And 7 months pregnant with his child? I know. Sienna's hands shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. Grace, I need to ask you something. When you were with Brandon, did he ever ask you for money? Grace went very still. Why? Because he's asking me for money, a lot of money. He says the business is going through a rough patch, that investors are pulling out because of the scandal, that if I really loved him, I'd help him through it. How much is he asking for? $500,000. Grace took a sip of her water, buying time to think. Sienna, why are you telling me this? Because I did some research after we got engaged. Sienna looked up, and her eyes were much sharper than Grace expected. Grace Eleanor Montgomery, daughter of Theodore Montgomery of Montgomery Oil and Energy Holdings, estimated personal net worth somewhere north of $300 million. So she knew. Brandon doesn't know this, does he? Sienna continued. No, but he's about to find out when that Texas Monthly article comes out. When the world discovers that the poor pregnant wife he left is actually one of the richest women in Texas. Sienna leaned forward. I'm not stupid. I know everyone thinks I'm a gold digger who broke up your marriage, but he lied to me too. She's not the enemy, Grace realized. She's another victim, just younger, just naive enough to believe his lies were love. What did he tell you, Grace asked quietly, that you were separated, that the marriage was over before we started, that you were cold and distant and making his life miserable, that the pregnancy was a last-ditch attempt to save something that was already dead. Grace's hand moved to her belly protectively. I didn't know our marriage was in trouble until I saw your Instagram post, the day of my 20-week ultrasound. Sienna closed her eyes. I am so sorry. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions. I should have. Sienna's voice broke. My followers are attacking me. I've lost sponsorships. Brands won't touch me. And now Brandon wants money and I'm realizing I don't actually know him at all. You don't, Grace said. Neither did I. That's the problem with men like Brandon. They show you exactly what you want to see until they can't anymore. They sat in silence for a moment. Grace watched Sienna wipe tears with a napkin, carefully trying not to smudge her makeup. She recognized the gesture. She'd done it herself, in restaurant bathrooms, in parked cars, trying to maintain the facade that everything was fine when everything was falling apart. What are you going to do? Sienna finally asked. About what? About him, about the money he's asking for, about everything. Grace considered the young woman across from her, 26 years old, 2 million Instagram followers, beautiful, successful in her own right, and completely out of her depth. I'm going to divorce him, make sure my daughter is taken care of, and then move on with my life. What you do is up to you. But if I give him the money, don't! Grace's voice was firm. If you give him that money, you'll never see it again. He's using you, just like he used me. The only difference is I didn't have visible money for him to take. You do. Sienna's eyes filled with fresh tears. I really thought he loved me. Maybe he did. Maybe he still does. But love doesn't mean anything if it comes with a price tag. Thank you, Sienna said finally, for meeting me, for being honest. I know I don't deserve. You deserve better than this, Grace interrupted. We both do. We all do. As Grace drove back to the ranch, her phone rang. Marcus. Emergency meeting. Brandon found out about your interview with Texas Monthly. Someone leaked it. He knows about Montgomery Oil. He knows everything. Good, Grace said. Let him know. Let him panic. Because now we play my game, not his. The meeting took place in Marcus Webb's downtown Austin office, 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A conference room designed to intimidate. Brandon arrived with his attorney, Michael Ross. Brandon looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled suit, dark circles under his eyes. Grace felt nothing. She arrived with Marcus and her father. Theodore Montgomery in a business suit was a force of nature. Brandon's face went white when he saw him. Mr. Montgomery, Brandon stammered. I didn't know. Sit down, Theo said. It wasn't a request. They sat. Marcus opened a folder with deliberate precision. Let's discuss the terms of the divorce. Grace is asking for dissolution of marriage, sole custody of the minor child, with reasonable visitation for Brandon, and child support calculated based on California guidelines given both parties' actual income. Actual income? Michael Ross frowned. What does that mean? It means we've done a thorough analysis of both Mr. Ashford's and Ms. Montgomery's financial situations, and we've discovered some interesting discrepancies. Marcus slid a document across the table. Brandon's face went from white to green. These are records from Ashford Digital Media showing significant company funds diverted to personal accounts, specifically Mr. Ashford's personal accounts, funds used for personal entertainment, gifts, and travel. Would you like to explain this? Brandon looked at his attorney. Michael looked at the documents, then at Brandon, then back at the documents. Did you use company funds for personal expenses? Michael asked. It's my company. A company with investors, a company with a board, a company where such actions constitute embezzlement and fraud. Marcus's voice was ice cold. Now, we could report this to the appropriate authorities, or we could come to an arrangement. This is what power feels like, Grace thought. Not revenge, not anger, just cold, clear knowledge that I hold all the cards and he never even knew we were playing poker. What kind of arrangement? Michael asked carefully. Marcus slid another document forward. Grace is willing to overlook the financial improprieties in exchange for an uncontested divorce, sole physical custody with visitation at Grace's discretion, and child support of $10,000 per month adjusted annually for inflation. $10,000? Brandon exploded. That's insane. My company is worth about $8 million after debts and accounting for the embezzled funds. Marcus interrupted smoothly. We had it independently valued. Your company is failing, Mr. Ashford. The only reason it hasn't collapsed entirely is because Preston Caldwell has been keeping it afloat. Brandon turned to Grace. You did this. You ruined my company. I did nothing, Grace said quietly. You ruined your own company when you stole from it to impress your girlfriend. I'm just refusing to go down with your ship. But $10,000 a month? I can't afford that. Then get a job. Grace's voice was steel. The child support is non-negotiable. You wanted to be a father. This is what that costs. Theo leaned forward. My daughter is being extraordinarily generous. She could take you to court, expose the embezzlement, destroy what's left of your company and your reputation. But she's choosing mercy. I suggest you accept it. Brandon looked between them, trapped, cornered, finally realizing that the woman he'd underestimated had been playing chess while he was playing checkers. What about Sienna? He asked desperately. She has money. She can help. Sienna Rivers broke off your engagement this morning, Marcus said. Her attorney contacted me. Apparently, she doesn't want to marry a man facing potential fraud charges. Brandon crumpled, actually crumpled in his chair. This isn't fair, he whispered. Grace stood, placed both hands on her pregnant belly, looked down at the man she'd once loved. You're right, she said. It's not fair. It's not fair that I spent 4 years hiding who I was to make you feel big. It's not fair that I gave up my family, my identity, my power because I thought that's what love required. It's not fair that you cheated on me while I was pregnant with your child. It's not fair that you proposed to someone else before our divorce was even filed. None of this is fair, but it's reality. And you're going to live with the consequences of your choices. Just like I'm living with mine. She turned to Marcus. Draw up the papers. I want this done before my daughter is born. As Grace walked out of the conference room, she heard Brandon call after her. Grace, wait! We can work this out. I made a mistake. Grace! She didn't turn around. In the elevator down, Grace caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. 7 months pregnant, designer maternity dress, hair perfect, posture straight. She looked like her mother, like her grandmother, like every strong woman who'd come before her. She didn't smile. She just nodded once at her reflection. Acknowledgement, recognition. This is who she was now. 2 months later, Grace Eleanor Montgomery went into labor at 3 in the morning on a cold December day. Her mother drove her to the hospital. Her father followed in his own car. Becca caught the first flight from San Francisco. Brandon was notified as per the custody agreement. He didn't respond. Labor was long, brutal, exhausting, 36 hours of contractions and pain and wondering if her body could actually do this. At hour 28, Grace was convinced she was dying. "I can't," she told Dr. Brennan. "I can't do this. It's too much." "You can," her mother said, holding her hand. "You're a Montgomery. We're built for this." At 3:12 in the afternoon on a Thursday, Grace gave birth to a 7-pound, 4-ounce baby girl. The moment they placed her daughter on her chest, everything else disappeared. The divorce, the scandal, the pain. All of it faded to background noise against the reality of this tiny, perfect human. "Hi," Grace whispered. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your mama." Her daughter opened her eyes, dark blue, alert, taking in the world with quiet intensity. "What's her name?" Dr. Brennan asked. "Eleanor Caroline Montgomery. Ellie for short." Eleanor after her great-grandmother who built an empire. Caroline after her mother who taught her grace under pressure. Montgomery because her daughter would never hide who she was. That night, alone in her hospital room with Ellie sleeping on her chest, Grace made a promise. "You will never wonder if you're enough. You will never hide your light. You will never make yourself small for anyone, I promise." The Texas Monthly article published the next day. The cover showed Grace on the ranch, 7 months pregnant, with the headline, "The Oil Heiress Who Disappeared and Why She's Back." The article told her story, her truth, her journey from hiding to standing tall. It mentioned in the final paragraph that Grace had given birth to a daughter and was now focused on motherhood and her plans to invest in female-founded companies through a new venture capital fund, the Montgomery Foundation for Women in Business. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Interview requests, speaking invitations, investment pitches, women sharing their own stories of hiding, of shrinking, of finding courage. Grace's Instagram, which she'd barely used before, gained 200,000 followers in 3 days. But she didn't post influencer content. She posted real life. Her daughter, her ranch, her family, her truth. One photo in particular went viral. Grace in a hospital gown, no makeup, hair a mess, holding newborn Ellie. Caption, "She's here. Eleanor Caroline Montgomery, 7 pounds 4 ounces of pure power. And she will never apologize for existing." 3 million likes, 50,000 comments. Women sharing their own stories, their own journeys, their own moments of choosing themselves. Sienna Rivers commented, "Congratulations, Grace. She's beautiful. You're both so strong." Grace replied, "Thank you. Wishing you well. Mature, dignified, final." Brandon didn't comment, didn't call, didn't visit. Preston Caldwell did. He arrived at the ranch a week after Ellie's birth with flowers and a proposal. "I bought Brandon out of the company, and I'd like you to consider being an investor." "Why me?" "Because you understand business, because you're smart, because you see potential where others see risk, and because, frankly, I need someone who won't steal from their own company." Grace looked at Preston, really looked at him. Honest, hardworking, everything Brandon pretended to be. "Send me the numbers," she said. "I'll consider it." This is what starting over looks like, Grace thought. Not revenge, not destruction, just choosing better, choosing differently, choosing me. 6 months later. Ellie was sitting up now, grabbing at everything, smiling at everyone. She had Grace's eyes and unfortunately Brandon's chin, but she was perfect anyway. Grace lived at the ranch permanently now. Her childhood room had been converted to a master suite. Ellie's nursery was down the hall. 3 generations of Montgomery women under one roof. Grace was active on the Montgomery Oil Board now, contributing, engaging, using the business education her father had given her. She'd also launched the Montgomery Foundation, which had already invested in 15 female-founded companies. Brandon sent child support on time. $10,000, the first of every month. Not a penny more, not a day late. He was terrified of going back to court. He was dating someone new, another influencer, younger than Sienna. Grace saw it on Instagram and felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just relief that he was someone else's problem. The divorce was finalized 4 months ago. Grace got her maiden name back. She was Grace Eleanor Montgomery again. Fully, finally, unapologetically. The morning of the conference, Grace woke at 5:30 to Ellie's babbling through the baby monitor. Not crying, just talking to herself in that language only babies speak. Grace patted down the hall in bare feet, her silk robe trailing behind her. Ellie stood in her crib, holding on to the rails, bouncing with excitement when she saw her mother. "Good morning, my love," Grace said, lifting her daughter. Ellie immediately grabbed Grace's hair, as she always did. "Today's a big day for Mama. Want to help me get ready?" She carried Ellie downstairs, where Caroline was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" Grace asked. "Old habit. Your father's been up since 4 checking the stock market." Caroline poured 2 cups. "Nervous about today?" "Terrified." "Good, it means it matters." Caroline smiled at her granddaughter. "Come here, sweet girl. Let Grandma feed you breakfast while your mama gets herself together." Grace showered and dressed with unusual care. The Alexander McQueen dress had been tailored specifically for her post-baby body. She'd regained her pre-pregnancy figure mostly, but everything sat differently now. She was softer, rounder, more substantial. She looked like a mother. And for the first time in her life, Grace liked what she saw in the mirror. Her phone buzzed with messages. Becca, sending encouragement. Marcus, confirming legal paperwork for a new investment. Preston, sharing that Ashford Digital Media, now renamed Caldwell Media Group, had just signed 3 major new clients, and 1 message from an unknown number. "Grace, it's Sienna. I know we haven't talked in months, but I wanted you to know I'll be watching your speech today. You changed my life. Thank you for that. Also, I left Brandon 2 weeks after we talked. Best decision I ever made. Wishing you all the success today." Grace stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Proud of you. That took courage." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "I learned from the best." Downstairs, her father was reading the business section, Ellie on his lap trying to grab the newspaper. "Ready?" Theo asked. "As I'll ever be." "Grace," her father set down the paper. "You know what your grandmother used to say? She said the Montgomery women don't ask for permission to be powerful. We just show up and remind everyone who we've always been." Grace kissed the top of Ellie's head. "I'm going to make her proud. All of them." "You already have." The drive to Houston took 2 hours. Becca met them at the convention center, looking polished and professional. 2,000 women, Becca said, handing Grace a bottle of water. "All here to see you. No pressure." "Thanks. That helps immensely. You're going to be amazing. You know why? Because you're not performing. You're just telling the truth. And the truth is always powerful." Backstage, Grace could hear the crowd, women talking, laughing, networking, a sea of voices, each one representing a story, a struggle, a triumph. The event coordinator appeared. "Miss Montgomery." 5 minutes. Grace's hands started shaking. She pressed them against her dress, willing them to steady. "Hey," Becca touched her arm. "Remember that night in the Target parking lot?" "Unfortunately, yes. You were at your absolute lowest, and you still got up the next day. You still made the hard calls. You still chose yourself even when it was terrifying. These women need to see that version of you. The real one, not the polished one." Grace nodded, took a breath, thought about Ellie, sleeping peacefully in Caroline's arms in the green room. This was for her. All of it. The introduction was glowing. Grace walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. 2,000 women on their feet. She took the microphone, took a breath, found her mother at the front row, and spoke. "4 years ago, I disappeared. I gave up my name, my family, my identity. I thought I was being brave. What I was actually doing was hiding. And hiding never makes you safe. It just makes you invisible." She told her story, all of it. Meeting Brandon, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the divorce, standing back up. "I want to tell you there was one magical moment where everything clicked." There wasn't. It was messy, painful. I cried in Target parking lots. I had panic attacks in my childhood bedroom. I questioned everything. The audience was silent, listening. But here's what I learned. Your power doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being present, from showing up even when you're terrified, from making choices that serve you even when they're hard, from refusing to apologize for existing. Grace looked out at the audience and saw herself in every face. The young woman afraid to negotiate salary, the executive hiding a pregnancy, the entrepreneur downplaying success, the mother doing everything and apologizing for not doing more. Some of you came here hoping I'd tell you how to have it all, how to be perfect. I can't, because I don't have it all. I'm a single mother. My ex-husband cheated on me while I was pregnant. I hid my identity for 4 years because I was afraid. I'm human. I'm flawed. I'm figuring it out. She paused. But I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not sorry for that. My daughter will grow up watching a mother who takes up space, who makes hard choices, who isn't afraid to be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. That's the inheritance I'm giving her. Not money, though, there's plenty of that. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But the knowledge that she is enough, exactly as she is. The speech ended with a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Grace stood there, letting it wash over her. All these women, all these stories, all this collective strength. When it finally quieted, Grace added one more thing. Before I go, I want to say something to anyone listening who's where I was a year ago. Sitting in a parking lot, crying in a bathroom, wondering if you're crazy or if your feelings are valid. You're not crazy, your feelings are valid. And leaving doesn't make you a quitter. It makes you someone who knows their worth. Another wave of applause, louder this time. Afterwards, women lined up to talk to Grace, to share their stories, to ask advice, to say thank you. One young woman, maybe 25, approached with tears in her eyes. I just accepted a job offer for $30,000 less than I wanted because I was afraid to negotiate. After hearing you, I'm going back and asking for what I'm worth. Good, Grace said. And if they say no, then they're not the right company. Exactly. An older woman, perhaps 60, took Grace's hand. I stayed in a bad marriage for 35 years because I thought that's what you do. I finally left last year. Everyone thought I was crazy, leaving at my age, starting over. But listening to you, I realize I'm not starting over. I'm just finally starting. Grace hugged her. You're not crazy. You're brave. A woman in her 40s wearing a wedding ring spoke quietly. I'm not ready to leave yet, but hearing your story, knowing it's possible, it gives me hope that maybe someday I will be. No judgment, Grace said. You'll know when you're ready, and when that day comes, you'll be strong enough. The line continued for an hour, each woman carrying her own weight, her own story, her own journey. Finally, Grace returned to the green room where her family waited. Ellie had woken up and was playing with her grandmother's pearl necklace. When she saw Grace, she reached out, making grabbing motions. Mama's here, Grace said, taking her daughter. Did you have fun with Grandma? She was perfect, Carolyn said. And so were you, darling. Your grandmother would have been so proud. Today she was giving a keynote speech at a Women in Business conference in Houston. 2,000 women waiting to hear from her. Grace stood backstage in her Alexander McQueen dress, professionally styled hair, looking like exactly what she was. Powerful, successful, wealthy. You nervous? Becca asked, holding Ellie. Terrified. Good, you should be. Now go make them listen. Grace walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. She took the microphone, took a breath, looked at her mother in the front row, holding Ellie, and spoke. 4 years ago, I disappeared. I gave up my name, my family, my identity. I thought I was being brave. What I was actually doing was hiding. And hiding never makes you safe. It just makes you invisible. She told her story, all of it. Meeting Brandon, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the divorce, standing back up. I want to tell you there was one magical moment where everything clicked. There wasn't. It was messy, painful. I cried in Target parking lots. I had panic attacks in my childhood bedroom. I questioned everything. The audience was silent, listening. But here's what I learned. Your power doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being present, from showing up even when you're terrified, from making choices that serve you even when they are hard, from refusing to apologize for existing. Grace looked out at the audience and saw herself in every face. The young woman afraid to negotiate salary, the executive hiding a pregnancy, the entrepreneur downplaying success, the mother doing everything and apologizing for not doing more. Some of you came here hoping I'd tell you how to have it all, how to be perfect. I can't, because I don't have it all. I'm a single mother. My ex-husband cheated on me while I was pregnant. I hid my identity for 4 years because I was afraid. I'm human. I'm flawed. I'm figuring it out. She paused. But I'm not hiding anymore. And I'm not sorry for that. My daughter will grow up watching a mother who takes up space, who makes hard choices, who isn't afraid to be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. That's the inheritance I'm giving her. Not money, though. There's plenty of that. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but the knowledge that she is enough, exactly as she is. The speech ended with a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, women lined up to talk to Grace, to share their stories, to ask advice, to say thank you. One young woman, maybe 25, approached with tears in her eyes. I just accepted a job offer for $30,000 less than I wanted because I was afraid to negotiate. After hearing you, I'm going back and asking for what I'm worth. Good, Grace said. And if they say no, then they're not the right company. Exactly. That evening, back at the ranch, Grace sat on the porch with Ellie, 6 months old now, reaching for everything. Curious, fearless. Hey, baby girl, Grace said softly. Want to know a secret? Your mama used to be afraid. Afraid of being too much. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of her own power. Ellie gurgled, grabbing at Grace's necklace. But then you came along, and I realized I couldn't teach you to be brave if I was hiding. Couldn't teach you to take up space if I was making myself small. Couldn't teach you that you're enough if I didn't believe it myself. Grace's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Brandon's attorney wants to discuss increasing visitation. Should I respond? Grace looked at Ellie, at this perfect, tiny human who would grow up with questions, with complications, with a father who wasn't present the way he should be, but who would also grow up knowing she was loved, knowing she was chosen, knowing her mother fought to give her the best life possible. Grace texted back, if Brandon wants more time with his daughter, he can take parenting classes, maintain sobriety, and prove he's stable. Then we'll talk. Not before. It wasn't revenge, it was boundaries. It was protecting her child. It was choosing what was right over what was easy. Grace stood at the window of her childhood home, now her home again, watching the sun set over the ranch, holding Ellie, who was falling asleep against her shoulder. This moment, this simple, quiet moment, this was everything. She didn't panic, didn't overthink, didn't check her phone obsessively. She just breathed, just existed, fully and completely, without apology. A year from now, she'd open the Montgomery Foundation's first office. 2 years from now, she'd make the Forbes list. 5 years from now, Ellie would start kindergarten. But those were just details, just markers on a journey that was really about something else entirely. Grace closed her eyes and made a promise to herself, to her daughter, to every woman who'd ever felt like she had to choose between being loved and being herself. We don't have to choose anymore. We can be both, powerful and soft, strong and vulnerable, wealthy and kind. We can take up space and still make room for others. We can be everything we are without apology, without permission, without fear. Ellie sighed in her sleep. Grace kissed the top of her head. Welcome to the world, baby girl. It's going to be complicated and beautiful and sometimes impossible. But I promise you this, you will never have to hide who you are. Not from me, not from anyone. You're a Montgomery. We don't hide, we rise. The sun set over the Texas ranch. Inside, 3 generations of Montgomery women gathered for dinner. Outside, the future waited. And Grace was finally, beautifully, unapologetically ready for it. So that's Grace's story. From hiding in a Target parking lot to standing on stage in front of 2,000 women. And I want to know, what moment hit you the hardest? For me, it was when she sat in that empty nursery and realized she'd given up everything for someone who saw her as convenient. Drop a comment and tell me your moment. I genuinely read every single one, and your comments help shape what stories I tell next. If this resonated with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. I know, everyone asks for likes. But here's why it matters. YouTube shows this video to more people when it gets engagement early. So your like literally helps another woman who needs this story find it. Share this with someone who's making themselves small for someone else. We all know that person. Send them this link. It might be exactly what they need to hear today. And if you want more stories about women who stopped apologizing and started owning their power, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Because we're building something special here, a community that celebrates women who choose themselves. All right, I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.